We'd been married for 3 years. My husband, Michael, took a 5-day business trip every month, and inside his suitcase, there was a mysterious set of lingerie. Suspicion gnawing at me, I secretly booked a flight and followed him to his hotel. Disguised as a member of the housekeeping staff, I opened the door to his room, and what I saw froze me to the spot. Dusk had settled over the city, the sky painted a melancholic purple that signaled the end of another day. I was carefully folding a few of Michael's crisp, white dress shirts and placing them in his travel bag when he walked into the bedroom. He was still in the suit he'd worn to the office, but his tie was loosened, and he carried the mixed scent of stale cigarette smoke and city grime that clung to him after a long day. After 3 years of marriage, I had grown so accustomed to this smell. So familiar, in fact, that it sometimes felt as if I had forgotten my own scent. Michael came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. His chin rested lightly on my shoulder, and his low voice rumbled near my ear. "You must be tired, honey. I can pack for myself, you know. If you spoil me like this, what am I supposed to do when some other man tries to steal you away?" I managed a small smile, the kind I always wore to hide the petty worries of a stay-at-home mother. I turned in his arms and straightened his collar. "It's a business trip, not a vacation. And you'll be gone for 5 days. If I don't pack for you, you'll be lost when you can't find something in the morning with no one there to help. This time it's the conference in Chicago, right? Try to go easy on the drinking. Your stomach has been acting up lately." Michael nodded, his gaze as sweet as honey. Looking at him then, anyone in the Sarda world would have envied me, would have crowned him husband of the year. He let me go and headed for the shower. The sound of the powerful spray of water swallowed my faint sigh. I turned back to the suitcase. I usually tucked some emergency cash into a down hidden pocket in the lining, and I intended to add a bottle of vitamins for him. But as I reached inside, my fingertips brushed against something soft, cool, and smooth. I pulled it out. It wasn't a handkerchief or a spare pair of socks. In my hand was a fiery red lingerie set. The design was so audacious, it made my face flush just looking at it alone. The tags were still on, it was brand new. And the size was a small, far smaller than anything I wore. I was a woman who preferred simple styles. My closet was filled with whites and beiges, mostly cotton. I had never even imagined wearing something so flimsy and provocative. A chill ran through my body, then my blood began to boil. I stood there, rooted to the spot, holding the lingerie as if it were a hot coal. Just then, Michael emerged from the bathroom with only a towel wrapped around his waist, whistling. As he dried his hair, his eyes fell on the strange object in my hand, and his stride faltered for a fraction of a second. It was a fleeting, microscopic hesitation that only a keenly observant person would have noticed. But he quickly regained his usual composure, approached me with a sheepish grin, and put his arm around my shoulder. "Oh, that. I was supposed to give that to Mr. Henderson tomorrow. I completely forgot I put it in there. He asked me to pick up a gift for his new girlfriend. Said he was too embarrassed to go buy it himself, so he asked me to grab it for him since I was running errands." I searched his eyes for any sign of a flicker, any hint of a lie, but I found nothing. Either his performance was flawless, or he was telling the truth. It was a well-known fact around his office that his boss was a notorious womanizer. It wasn't unheard of for him to ask a trusted subordinate to run such a private errand. Seeing my silence, Michael gently pinched my cheek. "Wipe that suspicious look off your face. Do you have any idea how hard I work to provide for this family? When would I ever have time to meet another woman? Besides, my type is a smart, wonderful wife who makes a great home-cooked meal, just like you. Not some empty-headed girl who would wear something like that." I nodded, but a shapeless anxiety continued to squirm in my gut. I folded the faction lingerie and placed it on the dresser. I said, trying to sound nonchalant, "All right. But be careful getting involved in your boss's love life. It only ever leads to trouble." That night, as Michael slept soundly beside me, his breath even and deep, I couldn't find sleep. I carefully slipped out of bed and retrieved his discarded dress shirt from the laundry hamper. Under the soft yellow glow of the bedside lamp, I examined it. The collar was clean, and there was no unfamiliar perfume. But when I turned over the cuff of the left sleeve, my heart plummeted. Tucked Into the inner seam was a tiny, coral pink smudge. It wasn't food, and it wasn't ink. It was lipstick. When I rubbed it with my finger, a slight tackiness remained. I never wear coral pink lipstick. Muted reds are the only shades that suit me. But I knew one person who adored that color. A person who was a frequent guest in our home, who called me her big sister with such affection. It was Chloe, the girl Michael's parents had taken in and sponsored since she was 6, the girl Michael always said he cherished like his own little sister. I remembered the times Chloe had come over for dinner. How she would casually brush her hand against Michael's when reaching for a dish, or asking him to fix something for her. I started to piece all the fragments together. For the past 3 years, Michael had gone on a business trip for exactly 5 days every trip. Single month. His phone was often turned off in the evenings, and there were mysterious expenses on his credit card statements that he'd explained away as client entertainment. A chill crept up my spine in the vastness of our bedroom. The foundation of trust I had painstakingly built over 3 years felt like it was beginning to crack. All because of a tiny lipstick stain and a lie that had been far too smooth. The next morning, the sky was heavy with the threat of rain, the air thick and suffocating. Michael woke up earlier than usual, and took extra care in getting ready. He even spritzed on the sandalwood cologne I had given him for his birthday. He kissed my forehead lightly, his voice full of concern. "I'm off, honey. Look after Leo, and if you're not feeling well, call my mom and ask her to come over. I'll have my phone off during meetings, so I'll call you when I get to the hotel tonight." I clutched my stomach and grimaced, feigning pain. My stomach hurt so much. "I think I ate something cold last night. You should just go." "I don't think I can. See you off to the airport. I'll rest for a bit and then drop Leo off at my mom's." Michael's face clouded with worry for a moment, but after feeling my forehead, he seemed reassured, picked up his suitcase, and left. The sound of the door closing echoed with a cold finality. The moment he was gone, I shot up from the bed. The fake agony on my face vanished, replaced by a steely resolve I never knew I possessed. The night before, while Michael was asleep, I had secretly placed a micro GPS tracker deep inside the bottom lining of his suitcase. I opened the app on my phone. A blue dot began to move across the map. It wasn't heading towards JFK for a flight to Chicago, as he had claimed. The car moved slowly through the morning rush hour traffic before getting on the I-87, heading north towards the Catskills. I dropped our son, Leo, off at my mother's house, telling her I had an urgent work matter to attend to. Then, I hailed a cab and followed the path of the blue dot. As the scenery blurred past the car window, my mind was a chaotic storm. I remembered him on our wedding day, holding my hand in front of our parents and vowing to love me for eternity. I remembered him holding our newborn son all night after my C-section. Those memories clashed with the image of the red lingerie and the coral pink lipstick stain, creating a vortex of confusion that tore at my heart. An hour or so later, the taxi stopped at the entrance of a 5-star private resort, nestled in a secluded area of the Catskills about 2 hours from the Catskills city. This place was a veritable paradise, a collection of private villas, surrounded by a lush pine forest, completely cut off from the outside world. I paid the driver, pulled my hat down low, covered my face with a mask, and walked into the lobby. Hiding behind a large potted plant, I saw him. Michael was not alone. Standing beside him was a petite woman. She wore large sunglasses that covered half her face and a seductive backless dress. But even with her attempts to conceal her identity, the way she tilted her head, the way she linked her arm through his as if it were the most natural thing in the world, was painfully familiar. They checked in and took a golf cart towards the exclusive villa section, an area that required a key card for access. Security was tight, outsiders couldn't just wander in. I circled around to the back of a building where the housekeeping staff gathered. A young employee with a sweet face and beads of sweat on her forehead was loading towels onto a cart. Taking a deep breath to steady my trembling voice, I approached her. I grabbed her hand, my eyes welling with tears. "Please. You have to help me. My husband has been swindled by a cult. They've dragged him in there and are trying to force him to sign over our house. He's not answering his phone. If he signs those papers, my son and I will be out on the street. Please, just lend me a uniform and a key card for 30 minutes. I'll go in, get my husband, and bring it right back." The young woman looked at me, her expression a mix of pity and hesitation. "But, ma'am, the rules here are so strict. If my manager finds out, I'll be fired on the spot." I pulled $300 from my purse and pressed it into her hand. My voice was a desperate plea. "I'm begging you. I promise you won't get in any trouble. I just need to save my husband. Please, think of this as a little something for a coffee, a token of my gratitude. They say saving a life is the greatest good you can do." $300 was a significant amount for a housekeeper. That, combined with my look of sheer desperation, must have stirred her compassion. She glanced around nervously and then nodded. "Okay. Go into the supply closet and change quickly. I'll stand watch. But only 30 minutes, you hear me?" 5 minutes later, I emerged wearing a loose-fitting uniform, pushing a cart laden with towels and bed linens. My heart was pounding like a drum. I was no actress, but the agony of betrayal had transformed me into a performer capable of the role of a lifetime. I pushed the cart towards Villa 3208, the location where the blue dot on my phone had stopped. Each step felt as if my feet were weighted with lead. The beautiful gravel path beneath me felt like a road to hell, leading me to the precipice. Cruelest truth of my life. I stood before the heavy, solid wood door of Jap. Villa 3208. A chill from the shaded corridor prickled the back of my neck, but my palms were slick with sweat. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. In the baggy housekeeper's uniform, I felt pathetic and small, like a thief about to steal away my own happiness. I raised a trembling hand and pressed the doorbell. The long, clear chime broke the serene silence of the luxury resort. It sounded like a death knell, tolling the end of my 3-year marriage. There was a moment of silence from within, then the sound of shuffling slippers and a man's grumbling voice. "I told them we don't need housekeeping. So annoying." The familiar voice sent a sharp pain through my chest. It was Michael, the same exemplary husband who had kissed my forehead this morning and told me to take care of myself. I swallowed hard and forced a professional, impersonal tone. "Excuse me, sir. The front desk sent a request for extra towels to this room." The door opened a crack, held by the security latch. I could see half of Michael's face. His hair was soaking wet, and he was wearing nothing but a towel around his waist, revealing the same strong, bare shoulders I leaned on every night. Seeing me in a housekeeper's uniform with my head bowed, he scowled and tried to slam the door shut. "You have the wrong room. We didn't call for anything." Just as the door was about to close, some unseen force propelled me forward. I threw all my weight into the heavy cart, ramming it against the door. The impact startled Michael, making him stumble backward. The security latch, unable to withstand the force, snapped off. The door swung wide open. The interior of the lavish suite was revealed in an instant. The air was thick with the cloying scent of stale wine mixed with the bitter smell of sex. The large bed, with its pristine white sheets, was a chaotic mess, rumpled and disheveled. And there, sitting at the vanity, was a woman. She was holding a hairdryer, a thin, wine-colored silk robe hanging for master precariously off her shoulders, revealing smooth legs and pale skin. Startled by the loud noise, the woman turned around. Our eyes met. In that moment, time stood still. The air in the room seemed to vanish, and I couldn't breathe. The woman was not a stranger. She wasn't a business partner or a fighter. Colleague I had never met. It was Chloe. The same Chloe his parents had sponsored since she was 6. The poor orphan girl Michael always said he cherished like his own little sister. The girl who often ate at our house, who called me sister with every other breath, the girl whose pitiful circumstances had moved me to buy her expensive clothes. I was frozen to the spot, my feet feeling as if they had taken root in the plush carpet. Nausea rose in my throat. It wasn't just jealousy. It was a revulsion, a sickening feeling of witnessing something incestuous and perverse that consumed my mind. I looked from Michael to Chloe and back again. Michael's face was Ashen, his eyes wide with terror as if he had seen a ghost. But Chloe, she wasn't flustered at all. There was no trace of the shame or guilt one would expect from someone caught in the act of adultery. She slowly put down the hairdryer, and a cold, defiant, arrogant smirk twisted her lips. She stood up, pretending to adjust her robe while subtly revealing the curve of her breast. Then, she uttered a single sentence that sent an icy shiver down my spine. "Sarah. You're a little early." "Michael, honey, I told you to lock the door. You're so careless." Her words were like a slap across my face, shattering the last, fragile thread of hope that this might all be a misunderstanding. My world didn't crumble with a loud explosion, but in the chilling silence of a cruel truth being unveiled. Before me were not my husband and his sister. They were two animals in human skin, baring their teeth, mocking my years of foolishness and trust. Chloe's brazenness was a spark thrown into a powder keg, incinerating all my fast restraint and pain. All that remained was the primal self-defense of a cornered woman. I didn't pull hair or break down in wretched sobs. I pulled my phone from my uniform pocket and hit the video record button. I aimed the lens directly at Chloe's sneering face and Michael's half-naked form. I told them to smile, both of them, to smile wide. My voice, devoid of its usual softness, rang out as hard and sharp as steel. I would be sure to capture this beautiful moment of their happy, incestuous reunion. And then I would send it to the entire family, to everyone at his company, for the whole world to see and admire. That finally snapped Michael out of his shock. Gripped by sheer terror, he lunged at me, trying to snatch the phone from my hand. "Sarah, are you crazy? Put the phone down. Let's just calm down and talk." I quickly stepped back, dodging his grasp. I screamed at him to stay back, that if he took one more step, I would start a live broadcast right then and there. I reminded him that his boss and his own mother were my friends on social media. I asked him if he wanted me to turn that vice president title he cherished so much into ashes in 30 seconds. My threat had an immediate effect. Michael froze, his hands raised in surrender, his face a deathly gray. "Please," he begged, "please don't do this. I was wrong. I can explain everything." "Explain?" I scoffed, but hot tears streamed down my cheeks. "What is there to explain? That this woman is your innocent little sister? That you two came to a five-star hotel just to reminisce about your childhood? Or are you going to explain the red lingerie that was in your suitcase last night?" Just then, Chloe stepped up beside Michael. The innocent, fragile girl I once knew was gone. With her arms crossed and her chin held high, she looked down at me, her voice dripping with contempt. "Go ahead, Sarah. Record it. Get a nice, clear shot. Michael is sick of you anyway. Just look at yourself. You always smell like diapers and kitchen grease. What Michael needs is a woman who satisfies him, who he can actually talk to, not a glorified housekeeper." "Shut up," Michael yelled at Chloe, but his pleading eyes were fixed on me. "She's just talking nonsense, Sarah. Please, listen to me. I made a mistake. It was just a one-time thing." "A mistake?" I lowered my voice and shoved the phone closer to Michael's face. "How long has this been going on? Tell me right now, in front of this camera. If you lie, I'm sending this video to your CEO this very second." Michael was trembling, cold sweat pouring down his forehead. He stammered, avoiding my eyes. "It was recent. Just a few months." "Liar," Chloe cut in, as if determined to either provoke me to the breaking point or force Michael to officially acknowledge their relationship. "Why are you so scared of her, Michael? Just tell her the truth. You loved me before you even married her. She was the one who got in the way." "Sarah, did you really think Michael married you for love? He married you because you were naive and obedient, the perfect shield to hide our relationship." Every word from Chloe was a poison-tipped dart piercing my heart. My 3-year marriage had been nothing but a charade. I was a puppet, a human shield. I looked at the man cowering in front of me, the man I called my husband, the man I shared my bed with every night. He looked so pathetic, so cowardly. He couldn't protect me, nor could he defend his mistress. He was just terrified of losing his precious job. A wave of disgust washed over me. Had I really loved, trusted, and sacrificed for this vile, spineless creature? The pain turned to contempt. I gripped my phone tighter. My hands were no longer shaking. Although it was a brutal admission, I had gotten the confession I needed. An eerie calm descended upon me, the kind that comes to a person with nothing left to lose. It was cold and terrifying, like the stillness before a storm. I stopped shouting. I began to walk around the room like a detective, surveying a crime scene. The victim was my marriage. I walked to a small table by the window. 2 half-empty glasses of red wine sat there. One of them had a distinct coral pink lipstick stain, the same shade I had found on my husband's sleeve. I raised my phone and took a close-up shot. The light from the window reflected off the blood-red wine, making it glisten seductively. I continued my slow, methodical tour of the room. At the foot of the bed, a torn condom wrapper lay discarded on the floor. I bent down and photographed that, too. My stomach churned with revulsion. I had to bite my lip to keep from vomiting. This was the proof of physical betrayal, raw and sordid. On the velvet sofa lay Chloe's black lace slip, the same style as the lingerie I'd found in Michael's bag. I picked it up with 2 fingers, as if handling contaminated waste, and took a picture of it with Michael's pale, terrified face in the background. "What are you doing?" Michael whimpered, his voice cracking. He dropped to his knees and crawled towards me, his hands clasped together. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. Please, stop taking pictures. What do you want? I'll do anything. I'll break up with her right now, I swear. Please, just don't ruin my life." I looked down at the kneeling man as I would a squirming cockroach. When his hand tried to grab my pant leg, I stepped back. "Don't you touch me with those filthy hands. You ask what I'm doing? I'm collecting evidence. This isn't just about catching you in the act, Michael. This is the scene of a crime, the murder of my trust and my dignity." Chloe was leaning against the wall, watching Michael on his knees. A flicker of disappointment and disdain crossed her face, but her mouth was still set in a defiant line. "Get up, Michael, why are you being so pathetic? What's she going to do? Divorce you? That's fine. I'll proudly be your wife." I turned to Chloe and sneered. "Proudly? Do you really think this society will accept a woman who sleeps with the man who was practically her brother? Do you think your precious mother-in-law, who pretends to be a saint, will ever accept you as her daughter-in-law? You're just his toy, Chloe. When I expose all of do you think he'll choose you? Or will he choose his career?" My words hit their mark. Michael fell into a deeper panic, pressing his forehead to the floor. No. I choose my family. I choose you, Sarah. Please, just forgive me this one time." I scanned the luxurious room, heavy with the stench of desire. The expensive furniture, the wine, the scented candles, it was all just garbage adorning their betrayal. I had prepared his meals and tended to his needs, and all the while, he was using the money I helped him earn to indulge in pleasure with his sister. "Enough," I said, my voice like a blade. "These photos, this video, they will be evidence in court. I don't need your cheap apologies. I need justice for the card. 3 years of my life you stole." I turned my back on them, on the kneeling husband and the now frightened mistress. If I looked at them for a second longer, I felt I might kill them both. With my bare hands. I walked out of Villa 3208 and slammed the door behind me, sealing off the filth inside from the outside world. The hotel corridor was still quiet, with soft music drifting from the ceiling speakers, a stark contrast to the hurricane raging in my heart. I held my head high and walked quickly, my back as straight as a board, like a soldier who had just emerged from a bloody battle, wounded but not defeated. I returned the cart and the key card to the young housekeeper, who was waiting anxiously. Seeing my pale face and bloodshot eyes, she started to ask a question, but then thought better of it. She just said quietly, "Take care of yourself, ma'am." I gave her a silent nod and hurried to the guest elevator. As the shiny metal doors closed, trapping me in a mirrored, sealed box, the strength drained from my body. I slid down the wall and collapsed onto the cold floor. My purse fell to my side, the phone inside feeling hot, as if the evidence it held was burning a hole through my soul. I saw my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. Disheveled hair, a pale face with no makeup, swollen eyes, and an ill-fitting, wrinkled housekeeper's uniform. How pathetic, how ridiculous I looked. To uncover my husband's truth, I had to debase myself, to act, to deceive. The tears I had so forcefully held back in front of those two shameless people now burst forth like a broken dam. I hugged my knees and sobbed, my cries echoing in the small space. It was a sound of pure, desolate grief. I cried for the 3 years of my youth wasted on the wrong man. I cried for my naive trust. And I cried for my young son, waiting for his mother at his grandmother's house, still blissfully unaware of what a monster his father truly was. A wave of disgust washed over me. I scrubbed at my arms and neck, as if I could scrape off the memory of his touch, as if I could vomit up all the false words of love he had ever whispered to me. Just then, a soft chime announced the rebellious elevator's arrival on the first floor, pulling me back to reality. I flinched, quickly wiping my tears with the back of my hand and taking a deep breath. No, Sarah. You can't cry. Crying is losing. Crying is giving them a reason to laugh at you. You've seen their true faces. Now is the time to stand up. I grabbed the handrail and slowly pulled myself to my feet. I looked at my reflection in the mirror one more time. My eyes were still red, but my gaze had changed. The desperate pain was gone, replaced by something cold and resolute. I straightened my collar and smoothed my hair. This isn't the end, I whispered to myself. This is just the beginning. I will make them pay for every single tear I've shed. The elevator doors opened, and the bright light of the lobby flooded in. I walked out, my head held high, striding through the crowd of elegantly dressed guests. Leaving the fragile shadow of a betrayed wife behind me, I headed for the taxi stand, my steps heavy but determined. The phone in my purse began to vibrate incessantly. The screen lit up with 2 words, Michael's mom. The name that once brought feelings of warmth and respect now filled me with an indescribable revulsion. Michael must have already reported back to her, or perhaps she had known all along, watching this sick play unfold to see how it would end. I took a deep breath and answered the call, my hand trembling. Before I could speak, my mother-in-law's saccharine sweet voice came through the receiver. Honey, where are you? I heard from Michael that you two had a little disagreement. It must be a misunderstanding. Come home now. It's not proper for a married woman to be wandering around so late at night. People will talk. I scoffed. The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy almost made me cry again. She didn't ask if I was okay, didn't ask what her son had done. She immediately blamed me for being out. I composed myself, my voice steady and cold. Mother, didn't Michael tell you? I just caught him in a hotel room, sleeping with Chloe. Is that what you call a little disagreement or a misunderstanding? There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. Then, her voice changed. Completely. It was no longer sweet. The pious facade she maintained from her weekly temple visits crumbled, revealing the scolding, harsh woman beneath. My goodness, why are you making such a fuss? Chloe is practically our own daughter. They've been close like brother and sister since they were children. It was probably just a silly game that went a little too far. What's all this drama about an affair? Don't you dare make a scene. A husband's shame is a wife's shame. Her every word was a dagger to my eardrums. In her eyes, her son sleeping with his adoptive sister was just a silly game that went a little too far. My throat felt tight. Mother, I saw it with my own 2 eyes. I have videos and pictures. They even admitted they've been together since before we were married. There's a limit to how much you can defend your son. My mother-in-law's patience seemed to wear out. Her voice became sharp, the vicious nature she kept hidden under layers of fancy clothes, finally exposed. Are you talking back to me right now? Let me make one thing clear. It's been common since ancient times for a man to have a woman or 2 on the side. As long as he brings home a paycheck to feed you and your child, what more do you want? If you cause a scandal and tarnish this family's name and get Michael fired, I will not stand by idly. Your son, Leo, he needs a father. Are you going to be so selfish as to make him the son of a single mother? She was now using my 2-year-old son to threaten me. The cruelty and shamelessness of this family were beyond my imagination. I realized I hadn't just married the wrong man. I had walked into a den of devils, disguised as a respectable family. I clenched my jaw and spoke, each word deliberate and clear. Don't you worry. I will not let my son grow up in such a hypocritical environment. And as for your family's precious name, it was shattered the moment your son and your daughter got into the same bed. With that, I hung up and blocked her number. The blaring horns of the city traffic faded into a distant hum. I stood there, an island of solitude in a sea of people. I felt a profound loneliness, but strangely, my heart felt lighter. The last emotional tie that bound me to that family had been severed cruelly, but definitively, by their own hands. By the time I got home, the sun was setting. The house was deathly quiet. Leo was still at my parents'. The bedroom, once a happy sanctuary, now felt as cold and silent as a tomb. A faint trace of Michael's sandalwood cologne lingered in the air. The scent that once captivated me now made my stomach turn with nausea. I couldn't afford to break down. My mother-in-law's threats and Chloe's brazenness echoed in my mind. I had to act before they did. I ran to the hidden safe in our walk-in closet. With trembling hands, I entered the code, our wedding anniversary. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside were a few pieces of jewelry my parents had given me, a small amount of cash, and the deed to our apartment. I rummaged through the documents, searching for the savings account passbook. With the $200,000 we had jointly saved over the past 3 years, money we were setting aside to buy a bigger house when Leo started elementary school, it was gone. I searched every corner of the safe, then Michael's study, his desk drawers. Cold sweat dripped down my back. Finally, at the very bottom of his closet, under a pile of old clothes, I found a thin folder. It was a sales contract for a high-end condo in Soho. The buyer's name was Chloe. The contract date was 2 months ago. The down payment was the exact amount of our joint savings. I collapsed onto the floor. The contract slipped from my grasp, fluttering down. As if to mock me. He hadn't just betrayed me physically, he had been secretly siphoning our shared assets to build a new nest with his mistress. He had stolen my sweat and tears, my child's diaper and formula money, to buy a home for his sister. Rage erupted within me, a furious inferno that burned away the last remnants of my vulnerability. I picked up my phone and called my friend Jessica, a top divorce attorney. My voice was hoarse, but urgent, resolute. Jessica, I need your help. Michael used our joint savings to buy a condo for his mistress. How do I get it back? I can't let them get away with this. On the other end of the line, Jessica's calm, professional voice was a life raft in a flood. Sarah, first, calm down and listen to me carefully. Don't make a terrible scene now. If you act rashly, he'll hide the rest of the assets, and it'll be over. For now, pretend you don't know about the money. Focus only on the affair. And keep him in a state of panic. Michael is obsessed with his reputation and his money. He'll do anything to placate you. That's your chance. You need to get him to transfer assets into your name or sign a debt acknowledgement. You have to have the upper hand. Crying won't solve anything. It's time to be smart and cold. I hung up and stared blankly into the empty space before me. Yes. I could no longer be the pitiful victim. I had to become the hunter. If he had deceived me, in the name of love, I would use his fake repentance to reclaim what was mine. And my child's. It was going to be a long night. But I would not sleep. I had to devise the perfect script to welcome my unfaithful husband home. After hiding the condo contract in a safe place, I sat numbly on the sofa. My mind was a tangled mess of questions. Scattered memories from the past few years suddenly rushed back, reassembling themselves into a single, horrifying picture. I thought of Chloe's 4-year-old son, Daniel. The boy had monolids and a high-bridged nose, a spitting image of Michael. In the past, when someone would casually remark that the boy looked more like his uncle than his father, the whole family would laugh and say that blood is thicker than water, so of course, he resembled his uncle. I had naively believed them. I remembered the look in Michael's eyes when he gazed at Daniel. It was more than simple affection for a nephew. It was a special kind of love. He had once canceled an important meeting just because Daniel had a fever, and he bought him expensive toys he had never once bought for our son, Leo. And Chloe, she always watched the two of them play with a strange look of satisfaction and possession in her eyes. A woman's intuition told me this secret went far beyond a simple affair. A more gruesome truth was hidden beneath the facade of this respectable family. I went into the bathroom and picked up Michael's hairbrush. A few strands of his dark hair were still caught in the bristles. I carefully collected them and placed them in a small Ziploc bag. Next, I needed a sample from Daniel. I remembered the boy had left his baseball cap on the shoe rack when he visited yesterday. Inside the cap, a few fine strands of his hair were stuck to the cap's in it lining. With a shaking hand, I collected them, placed them in a separate bag, and labeled it carefully. The next morning, in a small, secluded cafe, I met with a private investigator. A man called Mr. Davis. He had a weathered face and sharp, piercing eyes. He took the 2 sample bags from me. His voice was low and gravelly. "You want a paternity test? If you want it expedited, I can have the results in 24 hours. I nodded, placing an envelope of cash on the table. I gripped my purse tightly to hide my trembling hands. "Please, as soon as possible. And I need you to investigate Chloe's activities around the time she was pregnant, 5 years ago. Who the father was, where her supposed husband was at the time. I need to know the whole truth, no matter how brutal it is." Mr. Davis tucked the envelope into his inner jacket pocket and gave a firm nod. "Don't you worry. Uncovering the truth is what we do. But you should prepare yourself. Sometimes the truth hurts more than the lie." I left the cafe. The sky over New York was still overcast, portending a massive storm. I knew that the moment I held that DNA test result in my hand, my life would take an irreversible turn. I might lose my husband, and my child might lose his father. But it was better to cut out this malignant tumor with one swift, painful motion than to let it fester and consume my life in a talon. Pathological lie. I wasn't just fighting for assets anymore. I was fighting for the integrity of my lineage and for my own honor. That afternoon, the rain began to pour, a torrential downpour. The sound of raindrops lashing against the windows seemed to try and break the suffocating silence in the house. I sat in the living room, gracefully brewing a pot of herbal tea. The light, calming scent was a stark contrast to my taut nerves. The doorbell rang, urgent and loud. I knew the main actor had returned. I opened the door to find Michael standing there, soaked to the bone like a drowned rat. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stuck to his body, his face was gaunt, and his eyes were bloodshot. The moment he saw me, he lunged forward and collapsed onto his knees on the wet entryway floor. Rainwater and tears streamed down his face. "Sarah, I was wrong. I've committed a mortal sin. Hit me, curse me, do whatever you want. Just please, don't leave me," he wailed, his voice raw with cold and fear. He clung to my legs. The old me would have weakened, would have helped him up. I looked down at the top of his wet head, with cold, emotionless eyes. I took a step back, and he slumped to the floor. My voice was unnaturally calm. "Get up. You're getting the floor I just cleaned dirty. Come inside if you have something to say. Aren't you embarrassed for the neighbors to see? Is there any dignity left to lose in this house?" Michael staggered to his feet and followed me into the living room, water dripping from his clothes onto the polished hardwood floors. He sat hunched on the sofa and began his well-rehearsed excuse. "Sarah, I swear, what happened with Cropend? Chloe was a one-time mistake. I was drunk, and she seduced me. I'm a man, and with the alcohol, I lost control. I regret it so much. I broke it off with her immediately. Please, you have to believe me. The only people I love are you and our Leo." Listening to his smooth lies, I wanted to pour the hot teapot over his head. Drunk? Seduced? Broke it off? Then what about the lingerie in the suitcase, the regular business trips for the past 3 years, and the condo he just bought? Her? But I held back. I remembered Jessica's advice. I had to act better than he ever could. I sighed, pretending to wipe away non-existent tears. My voice was full of feigned resignation. "That's easy for you to say. But how can I ever trust you again, after it's been broken? You say you've broken up now, but who knows what you'll do behind my back? You manage all the finances in this house. Leo and I are just living off your charity. How would I ever know who you're giving money to, who you're supporting? Seeing my softened attitude, Michael eagerly grabbed my hand. No, that will never happen again. I'll prove it to you. If you can forgive me, I'll do anything. I pulled my hand away and looked him straight in the eye, delivering the final blow. Fine. If you really want me to believe that you're sorry and want to come back to our family, then prove it with your actions. Transfer the ownership of this apartment and the Genesis you drive into my name. I'll hold them as collateral for your promise. If you ever betray me again, you'll walk out of here with nothing. Are you willing to do that? Michael hesitated. A flicker of cold calculation crossed his eyes. He was a businessman, and to him, money was life. But he believed I was a soft-hearted, forgiving woman. And more importantly, he needed the facade of a peaceful family to protect his career. He gritted his teeth and nodded. Okay. I'll do it. I'll call the lawyer tomorrow and start the transfer process. As long as you're happy and you trust me again, what's the point of assets? It's all ours anyway. I smiled, a gentle smile that hit a razor-sharp edge. He was probably thinking he would transfer the deeds for now and then sweet-talk me into giving them back later. He had no idea this was a trap I had set to reclaim my and my child's share. Good. That's a promise. I'll see you at the lawyer's office tomorrow. The next morning, Michael did something he rarely did on a weekday. He woke up extremely early. He bustled around the kitchen, making toast and brewing coffee himself. The rich smell of butter filled the house, but it couldn't dispel the cloying atmosphere of hypocrisy. I sat at the table, watching him play the part frachens of the repentant husband. A mixture of cynicism and contempt churned within me. Did he really think a few pieces of slightly burnt toast and a cup of weak coffee could mend my shattered trust? Michael placed a plate of bread in front of me with a fawning smile. Eat up, honey, before it gets cold. I've already scheduled it with the lawyer. We're meeting at his office at 9. I'm a man of my word. If it makes you happy, if our family can go back to how it was, I'll do anything. I lifted my coffee cup. The hot steam touched my face but couldn't warm my frozen heart. I took a sip. The bitter taste spread across my tongue, just like the taste of this marriage. I nodded silently, feigning being moved. I know you still care about us. The only reason I'm doing this is for Leo's future. It's not because I'm greedy for a house and a car. The lawyer's office was cool and smelled of ink. Michael picked up the pen. I saw his hand pause for a fraction of a second as he looked at my name on the sack. Documents. I saw the flash of calculation and regret in his eyes. This was the wealth he had accumulated over his lifetime. It was his pride, the fishing rod that allowed him to boast outside. He looked up at me, as if waiting for me to say, as I always had, "It's okay, honey, I trust you," and back down. But this time, I remained silent. I just looked at him with an expression of naive, absolute trust and expectation. That look was my sharpest weapon at that moment. It cornered him, leaving him no room to retreat. If he didn't sign, his entire act of repentance would end right there. Michael swallowed hard, clenched his jaw, and signed his name with a flourish. The scratching sound of the pen on paper felt like it was tearing apart the last of his splendid facade. When I held the new deed and car title in my hands, both in my name, I didn't feel the elation I had expected. Only a heavy sense of responsibility. This wasn't a prize. It was the last life jacket to protect me and my son in the turbulent waters this man had created. I held the documents close to my chest, where my weary heart was beating. I promised myself there was no turning back now. Leaving the lawyer's office, Michael let out a long sigh, as if a great weight had been lifted. He put his arm around my shoulder and smiled. Well, you're the lady of the house now. You have everything, so can you finally forgive your husband? Let's pick up Leo tonight and go out for a nice family dinner. I looked at his beaming face and thought to myself, smile all you want. It will be the last time you smile before you realize you've lost everything. In the afternoon, a text message came from an unknown number. It was Mr. Davis. The message was short, but its weight could have brought down the sky. Results are in. You can pick up the documents at the same place. I dropped the spoon I was using to feed my son. The shock was like an invisible boulder crashing into my chest. I had prepared for the worst, but facing the truth, my limbs felt weak. I left Leo with a babysitter and rushed to the cafe. The city was still gray, and the wind rustling through the old trees made an eerie sound. Mr. Davis was sitting in a corner booth. On the table was a sealed brown envelope. He saw me, and a look of pity and compassion crossed his face. Without a word, he pushed the envelope towards me. With a trembling hand, I picked it up. It felt like I was receiving my own death sentence. I took a deep breath and tore open the seal. A stark white report appeared, the letters dancing before my eyes. I skipped over the complex technical terms and fixed my gaze on the final conclusion, printed in bold. Paternity probability, 99.99%. The world around me shattered into 1,000 pieces. 99.99%. An absolute number. The child who called Michael uncle, the child I had held and given gifts to, Daniel, was my husband's biological son. They had been meeting secretly for 5 years. 5.5 years of deception. Back then, Michael and I were dating seriously. We were planning a future, building a home, having children. While I was dreaming of wedding dresses, he was sleeping with his sister and making a child with her. My marriage had been a farce from before it even began, a shield to hide their filthy, incestuous affair. I remembered Michael holding Daniel, the look in his eyes not of an uncle, but of a proud father. I remembered Chloe looking at me with a mixture of pity and superiority. I hadn't just been betrayed. I had been a fool, a puppet. Manipulated by the entire family for years. A violent wave of nausea hit me. I covered my mouth and ran to the restroom, where I retched, trying to expel all the lies and deceit I had been forced to swallow. I splashed cold water on my face and looked at the woman in the mirror, her face pale, her eyes bloodshot. When I returned, Mr. Davis was waiting. He handed me another thin file. This is information on Chloe's ex-husband. Turns out, they were never legally married. They staged a fake wedding to legitimize the pregnancy. The man was a gambler. Deep in debt. Michael paid him to play the part of the groom. The entire thing was an elaborate stage play. I clenched the file in my hand, my nails digging into my palm. His cruelty and meticulous planning were beyond human. He wasn't just cheating. He had built a sophisticated system of fraud to maintain 2 separate lives. In one, he was the model husband. In the other, the incestuous lover. And I was the most foolish victim in this tragicomedy. I drove home in a daze, carrying a terrible secret that could burn his entire family to the ground. When I opened the door, Michael was playing with Leo, building with blocks. The sight of the father and son twisted my heart. How could he smile and play the part of a good father after everything he had done? His hypocrisy was chilling. As I was about to go to my room, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The moment I opened it, my blood ran cold. Sarah, I know Michael is trying to suck up to you. But don't you dare think you've won. You have a son, but I have a son too. Daniel needs his father. A son who carries his father's blood. Don't be selfish and try to keep them apart. If you don't let Michael go peacefully, I will expose everything to his company. Then you won't be able to show your face in public either. It was Chloe. Her shamelessness defied all logic. Far from being ashamed, she was now using the child born of their incestuous sin to threaten me. How dare she call that sacred fatherhood? Does an emotion born from trampling on ethics and morality in the darkness deserve to be called by that name? I read the message over and over, each word a blade slicing at my pride. She thought I was scared. She thought I would turn a blind eye for the sake of empty appearances and agree to share my husband with his sister. She was wrong. My patience was not cowardice. I looked from Michael, laughing and playing with our son, to the threatening text message. Fury rose within me, but I didn't lose my composure as I had at the hotel. This was the cold rage of a cornered mother. They had dared to drag our children into this filthy fight, to use their futures as bargaining chips. Fine, I whispered. I swiped the screen and took a screenshot of the text as evidence. You want to expose everything? You want to be proud? I'll grant your wish. But not on your terms. On mine. I didn't reply. Silence was my best weapon now. I would wait for her to grow anxious, to act out, to make a mistake. I slipped the phone into my pocket and approached the father and son with a fake smile. Honey, why don't you play with Craster? Leo a little longer? I have some things to take care of in the study. Michael looked up, blissfully unaware that the greatest storm of his life was brewing from his mistress's phone. He smiled. Sure, babe. You must be tired. I'll watch Leo. Can you handle it? I wondered silently. Are you watching your son, or are you worried about the secret life whose mother is now using him as a tool for emotional blackmail? I turned away, my steps more determined than ever. Tonight, I would begin my war. Late into the night, the chirping of crickets from the garden only amplified the silence. Michael was fast asleep in the next room, his oblivious snores audible through the wall. I sat in front of my computer, the blue light illuminating my computer face and the resolve in my tired eyes. I chose not to engage in a messy, public confrontation. That would only paint me as a hysterical woman and could even lead to legal trouble. I opted for a more refined, yet 1,000 times more brutal, method. Public opinion. I logged into a burner account I had created long ago. I joined several online ACE communities, a popular parenting forum, a private Facebook group for residents of our upscale apartment complex, and a subreddit for marital advice. Like someone planting landmines, I carefully typed out my post, word by word. The title: My husband is having an affair with his adoptive sister. My mother-in-law says it's a blessing in disguise. Should I share him? In the body of the post, I avoided any specific, identifying information. But I planted crucial clues throughout that only insiders or acquaintances would recognize: the model husband who takes 5-day business trips every month, the free ATS orphan sister who practically lives with them, and my mother-in-law's unbelievable advice. I played the part of a sweet, fragile wife seeking advice. In her confusion, along with the text, I attached a photo of a man and woman embracing from behind. The photo was slightly blurry, but the man's distinctive Rolex watch and the wedding band still on his ring finger were clearly visible. I had given him that watch as a wedding anniversary gift. The background was the unmistakable lobby of a 5-star hotel. I hit post. Within 15 minutes, the post was approved, and the first reactions started pouring in. Angry emojis flooded the screen, followed by a relentless stream of comments filled with vitriol and sympathy. Isn't that basically incest? What kind of psychopath is the mother-in-law? OP, divorce him immediately. A man like that isn't even recyclable. I read the comments silently, a mix of satisfaction and bitterness welling up inside me. I was using my pain to provide a spectacle for the world. No, I was using the world's hands to strip away the hypocritical mask of that family. The post quickly spread to other communities. Internet sleuths emerged, analyzing the watch, tracing the location. I knew that by morning, this rumor would reach Michael's colleagues, our neighbors, and our relatives. 1 would become 10, and 10 100. The seeds of doubt had been sown, and they would grow like weeds, choking the honor and reputation he valued more than life itself. The next morning, it wasn't my alarm that woke me, but the incessant buzzing of my phone on the nightstand. The screen was flashing with notifications from various online forums, text messages, and missed calls from unknown numbers. The seeds I had planted last night had grown into a full-blown hurricane, sweeping through the virtual world and now crashing into reality with terrifying force. I picked up my phone and scanned the comments. My anonymous post had been shared thousands of times. The prowess of the internet sleuths was frightening. From just the blurry photo of the Rolex and the wedding ring, they had nearly identified the man. That's a limited edition model, not many people in New York wear that one. His back looks familiar. Isn't that Michael P., the VP at X Corp? If it's X Corp, that's him. He's always saying he's going to Chicago for business. He had this whole husband of the year image. You really can't judge a book by its cover. Adoptive sister, my ass. He was raising her to devour her. The wife is at home with the kid while the husband is on a business trip with his sister. Each comment was a sharp blade, peeling away the glamorous facade Michael had spent years building. I felt a grim satisfaction mixed with a bitter taste. The happiness I had been so proud of was now just cheap entertainment for the world. Just then, a new text message notification popped up. The name Chloe flashed on the screen. Her tone was no longer the brazen, challenging one from a few days ago. Her message was filled with panic and fear. Sarah, what the hell do you think you're doing? Are you trying to get us all killed by posting that crap online? Delete it right now. People are doxing me. Do you have any idea I can sue you for defamation? I smirked and slowly typed my reply. Oh, Chloe, what are you talking about? I never mentioned any names. I was just sharing a story I heard. Are you feeling a little guilty, perhaps? And if you know of any law that protects a woman who steals another's husband and commits incest, please do let me know. There was no reply, but the typing indicator appeared and disappeared. Repeatedly. She was undoubtedly trembling, calling Michael for help. And Michael. He was probably sitting on pins and needles at his office, enduring the row whispers and suspicious glances of his colleagues. I put down my phone and went out onto the balcony, taking a deep breath of the morning air. Outside, life went on. But I knew that for Michael and Chloe, life would never be peaceful. Again. I didn't need to fight them directly. I could just sit here, sip my bitter coffee, and watch them tear each other apart inside the trap they had built for themselves. The price of betrayal, sometimes, isn't physical violence, but the utter humiliation felt under the world's pointing fingers. As expected, less than 2 hours later, Michael called. I let the phone ring for a long time, listening to the tender ballad he had set as my ringtone, a sound that now seemed so repulsive and absurd. Just as the last ring was about to fade, I answered, my voice deliberately drowsy. Hello? Honey, what's up? You're supposed to be in a meeting. Michael's voice on the other end was urgent and filled with suppressed rage. Cracking under the strain. Sarah, where are you? Meet me at the M Cafe near my office. Right now. We need to talk. I answered lazily, intentionally provoking him. I'm at the spa right now. If you have something to say, we can talk at home tonight. Don't play games with me. A major client is threatening to pull their contract. Don't you know the whole company is in an uproar because of that damn post you wrote? Get over here now. Please, I'm begging you. Our entire family's survival is at stake. Michael was practically shouting, his usual sophisticated demeanor gone. I hung up, applied a fresh coat of red lipstick, and chose the most confident-looking black dress from my closet. 30 minutes later, I arrived at the cafe. Michael was sitting at a corner table. He looked even more pathetic than I had imagined. His suit was wrinkled, his tie askew, and his eyes were bloodshot and hollow. An ashtray on the table was overflowing with cigarette butts. He jumped up when he saw me and tried to grab my hand, but I skillfully dodged him, sat down in the opposite chair, and ordered an orange juice. Please, Sarah, I'm begging you, he began, his voice hoarse. Punish me, however you want, but don't take away my livelihood. If you do this, our whole family will starve. How will Leo eat? I casually stirred my orange juice, watching the pulp swirl in the glass, and sneered. Are you worried about Leo? Or are you worried you won't have the money to send to your little love nest with your sister? You're afraid of losing your VP title, afraid you won't be able to support your mistress. I swear, it's over with her. I only care about our family, he insisted, his face still a mask of pity. Without a word, I took the carefully sealed brown envelope I had received yesterday from my purse. It was the DNA test result. I placed it on the table and slid it towards him. The sound of the paper sliding across the glass was sharp in the silence. What's this? Michael looked at the envelope, his eyes filled with suspicion and dread. Open it. It's a present for you. After you see it, we can talk again about who lives and who dies. With a trembling hand, Michael picked up the envelope and tore it open. The moment the report was revealed, I saw his pupils contract and the blood drain from his face. The paper slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor, the number 99.99% stamped on it like a death sentence. This is. Michael stammered, unable to form a complete sentence. And how? Are you going to explain this illegitimate child? I don't think you should be worried about contracts and your reputation right now. Aren't you more afraid that your 5-year secret of incest will be exposed to the world? I stared directly into his eyes, my voice as cold and sharp as a scalpel. Did you think I was a fool? Did you think I would never find out that you were cheating on me? Deceiving me? Even before we were married? Michael slumped back in his chair, his head in his hands, a picture of utter despair. The truth was laid bare, with not a single scrap of cloth left to cover it. The air in the cafe seemed to thicken, becoming sticky and suffocating. Michael sat with his shoulders shaking, but it wasn't from remorse. It was from the rage of a cornered animal. He looked up. The pleading look was gone, replaced by eyes that were red and blazing with hatred and menace. Realizing he could no longer play the part of the pitiful husband, he seemed to decide to cast off his final mask. "You spied on me? You dared to run a DNA test behind my back?" Michael snarled, his voice a low growl of fury. "I just found the truth you were so desperately trying to bury. Why? Are you scared?" I replied calmly. A recorder was running in my purse. Michael lunged forward and swept the orange juice glass off the table. The sound of shattering glass made a few nearby patrons jump, but he didn't care. "Don't you get cocky. You think you've won just because you have a piece of paper? This world runs on money. And what are you? A jobless housewife. What right do you have to fight me?" He pointed a finger in my face, his tone like a mobster's. "You leak this, and I will destroy your life. I'll hire the best lawyers to prove you're financially unfit to raise a child. I'll take Leo from you, and you'll never see his face again. You think I can't do it?" The moment he mentioned our son, my heart froze. To use the child he had so neglected to threaten me. This man's cruelty had hit rock bottom. But I couldn't show fear. If I backed down now, my son and I were finished. I looked at him and smiled with contempt. "Are you threatening me? You seem to think you still have a lot of money. Did you? I think I didn't know you embezzled company funds to buy your mistress a condo, and a car? Did you think I wouldn't find out you secretly took out $1 million loan against my parents' house as collateral?" Michael's face turned a deathly shade of gray. He had clearly never imagined I knew so much. His arrogant confidence began to waver. "Go on," I said. Louder. "I'm recording this right now." I pointed to my purse. "Every threat you make, every admission of your secret life, it's all being recorded. I think the court will find this recording very interesting. We'll see then whose life gets destroyed and who loses custody." Michael stared at my purse as if it were a ticking time bomb. He made a move to grab it, but I quickly stood up and backed away. Then I shouted, "Everyone, be my witness. This man is threatening me and is about to assault me." As heads turned towards us, Michael flinched. He ground his teeth and pointed a lobeless, shaking finger at me. "Fine. You think you're so smart. We'll see who goes down first." With that, he kicked a chair over in a fit of rage and stormed out. I stood there, watching his pathetic retreat. My legs were trembling slightly, but my mind felt strangely clear. I had laid all my cards on the table. There was nothing left to hide, nothing left to fear. The real war was just beginning. I left the cafe and walked along the leaf-strewn sidewalk. The autumn in New York was painfully beautiful, but my heart was as cold as midwinter. The confrontation had drained me, but I couldn't rest. Michael had declared war, and he would stop at nothing to destroy me. I had to strike first, a fatal blow that would ensure he could never harm my son or me again. I went to a public internet cafe. I had a laptop at home, but for this operation, I needed absolute anonymity. I logged into a burner email address I had created. I attached all the evidence I had painstakingly collected. The photos from the hotel, the suspicious wire transfers to Chloe, the deed to her condo, and most importantly, the DNA test results proving the incestuous relationship and the existence of their illegitimate child. I drafted an email addressed to the board of directors and the internal audit team of Michael's company. The subject line was short, but carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. Formal complaint regarding serious ethical violations and financial risks. Posed by Mr. Michael P., VP of Sales. In the letter, I didn't adopt the tone of a betrayed, whining wife. I wrote with the cold, objective voice of a whistleblower. I questioned whether a man with such a dissolute private life, who engaged in adultery, incest, and embezzled company funds to support his mistress, had the integrity and trustworthiness to represent the face of their corporation. I asked how their business partners I would react upon learning they were dealing with a man who deceived his own wife and child and the society at large. My finger hovered over the send button. A single click, and the career Michael had built over a decade would be reduced to ashes. I remembered his early days. As a new employee, the nights we stayed up together working on his reports, the mornings I ironed his shirts one by one before he went to meet clients. I had been his staunchest supporter, and now, with my own hands, I was about to destroy it all. But then, the image of him screaming that he would take Leo away, the image of him happy with Chloe's little family, flashed in my mind. My sympathy vanished. If he wouldn't give me a way out, I didn't need to show him any mercy. Click. The email was sent. I leaned back in the chair and let out a long breath, a mixture of hollowness and liberation. Outside, the rain had started to fall, thick drops pelting the window pane. I knew that inside Michael's company, a storm far greater than this rain was about to break. The news would spread like wildfire. With such irrefutable evidence, his suspension pending investigation was a certainty. Without his title, his power, and his money, he would be nothing but a soggy paper tiger, with no claws left to harm anyone. I stood up, straightened my collar, and walked out into the rain. I had just gotten home, not even having had time to change out of my clothes, damp from the sudden afternoon shower, when the phone rang. It was my mother. Seeing her name on the screen, my eyes suddenly stung, and a sense of foreboding washed over me. My hands trembled as I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, it's me. Is everything okay? Is Leo behaving?" There was no immediate answer from the other end, only the sound of ragged breaths and a choked sob. My heart seized. I dropped my purse to the floor. My mother, who had lived her entire life with patience and grace, who had never for a once shown a tearful face to her children. Her voice, broken and wet with tears, finally came through. "Sarah, honey, you need to come over. That family, Michael's family, they brought everyone. There. Here in the living room, causing a terrible scene." My blood boiled. I grabbed my car keys and bolted out of the house, like a madwoman. I had never imagined their shamelessness could reach this level. When their true nature was exposed, instead of feeling ashamed and reigning in their family, they had gone on the offensive. And their target was my innocent, ailing parents. As I drove, I thought of my father, a man who had lived his life as a model of integrity, who valued his honor more than anything. Could he withstand this shock? When I arrived at my parents' house, the scene before me sent a wave of fury through me. The gate was wide open, and the yard was filled with unfamiliar cars. From the living room, I could hear my mother-in-law's shrill screaming. "Madam, how on earth did you raise your daughter? A married daughter belongs to her husband's family, yet she dares to smear mud on our faces and ruin her husband's career. My poor family, to have taken in such an ungrateful, wicked daughter-in-law." When I burst into the house, my father was standing in the middle of the living room, his face flushed, clutching his chest and gasping for air. My mother was sobbing in a corner of the sofa, while my mother-in-law and her sisters stood with their hands on their hips, pointing and jeering. The moment she saw me, my mother-in-law lunged, trying to grab my hair. In that instant, my father, a gentle scholar who had spent his life with books and poetry, suddenly snatched a glass from the table and hurled it to the floor. The sharp, shattering sound silenced everyone. My father pointed to the door. His voice trembled, but it carried a steely resolve I had never heard before. "Get out. Get out of my house, now. My daughter married into your family to be loved and respected, not to be trampled on by the likes of you. My daughter was too kind, so she let you walk all over her, but I am not her. Your son is an adulterer, an incestuous fraud. How dare you, who failed so miserably to raise your own child, come here and raise your voice?" I stood frozen, tears streaming down my face. It was the first time in my life I had ever seen my father so enraged. He stood in front of me, his thin back suddenly feeling as strong and dependable as a mountain. My mother-in-law's face went white. She stammered a few words, but, intimidated by my father's fury, she quickly gathered her entourage and fled. I threw my arms around my father and wept like a child. Even if the whole world turned its back on me, my parents' arms would always be the safest harbor to return to. After calming my parents down and calling a doctor to check my father's blood pressure, I couldn't stay long. Only one worry consumed my mind, Leo. The madness of Michael's family showed they were no longer rational. A cornered beast will bite anyone, and my only vulnerability was my young son. As dusk fell, I drove to his daycare. It wasn't pickup time yet, and the entrance was quiet, with only an old security guard reading a newspaper. My heart pounded. I scanned the street for Michael's familiar car, terrified he had already been there and taken Leo, that he would use our son as a hostage to force me to retract my complaint or drop the lawsuit. When I ran into the classroom and saw Leo playing with blocks in the corner, I finally let out a breath of relief. He saw me, squealed with delight, and ran into my arms. I hugged him tightly, inhaling the sweet, milky scent of his soft hair. It felt like I was holding the entire world. His teacher looked surprised. "Mrs. P, what are you doing here so early?" His father usually picks him up. I looked at her, my expression serious and pleading. "Ma'am, we're having some complicated family issues. From today on, please do not release Leo to anyone but me. Not even his father or grandmother. If they come, please call me immediately and ask the security guard to detain them for just a moment. Please. My child's safety is at stake." Seeing my grave expression, the teacher nodded repeatedly, promising she would remember. I held my son's hand and walked to the car, but the anxiety didn't leave me. Remembering Jessica's advice, I immediately called a reputable private security firm. The money didn't matter. My bank account was dwindling, but my son's safety was priceless. "Hello, I'd like to hire 2 bodyguards for 24/7 close protection. Their mission is simple, to protect me and my son." Effective immediately, I said, my voice short and firm. That night, I took my son not to my parents' house, but to a temporary, high-security apartment I had rented. As I watched his sleeping form, the way his lips would sometimes curl into a smile in his dreams, I stroked his chubby cheek. Tears fell silently. Why did children have to bear the heartbreaking consequences of adults' mistakes? I made a quiet vow to my son, and to myself. Mommy will protect you with everything I have. Even if I have to become a demon to fight them, I will. You are all I have left in this storm. Outside, the yellow glow of a streetlight cast my lonely but resilient shadow on the cold wall. On Monday morning, the sky was unusually clear, but the air in Jessica's law office was thick with tension. On the polished wood desk lay a thick stack of tension files, the evidence of Michael's betrayal and deceit that I had gathered. Jessica sat across from me and slid the divorce petition my way. Her eyes held a mixture of sympathy and encouragement. "Sarah, read this over carefully. I've drafted it to be as advantageous for you as possible. It's a divorce suit, citing your husband's adultery, violation of the marital contract, and fraudulent concealment of joint assets." Jessica tapped the file. "With this evidence, especially the fact that he used joint assets to buy his mistress a home and fathered an illegitimate child, the court will be on our side. We're demanding an 80-20 split of the assets. 80% for you. That's the price he has to pay for his betrayal." I picked up the petition. The black and white letters swam before my eyes. 3 years ago, when I signed our marriage license, I had trembled with happiness, believing I had found my safe harbor. My hand was trembling now, too, but it was the painful tremor of having to amputate a rotten part of my own body. I thought of the past. The dinners I had prepared while waiting for him, the shirts I had ironed, my quiet sacrifices that allowed him to focus on his career. All of it was now a cold pile of ash. I glanced at my ring finger. Only a faint mark remained. "Are you sure? Once we file this with the court, there's no going back," Jessica asked one last time, her voice low. I took a deep breath and picked up the pen. The nib made a small but firm sound. As it touched the paper, I signed my name, Sarah. The script was strong and steady, no longer weak. "I don't need a way back, Jessica." I looked up at my friend, my eyes dry, but bright. "The only path I need is forward, for my son. I will not let him grow up in the shadow of such a despicable father and a rotten family. 80% of the assets isn't greed. It's me reclaiming the just compensation for my effort, my youth, and my trust that they stole from me." Jessica nodded with a satisfied smile, organizing the papers into her briefcase. "Good. I'll handle the rest. Brace yourself. Michael will lose his mind when he served with these papers. But don't be afraid. The law and morality are on our papers 7. Side. I left the law office. The bright golden sunlight streamed down on my shoulders. I felt lighter, as if a great weight that had been crushing my chest was finally lifted. The marriage had been dead for a long time. The divorce petition I filed. Today was merely its funeral. That night, as I was putting Leo to bed, a call came from Michael. I hesitated for a moment, then put the call on speakerphone, my hand still gently patting my tapper. Son's back. Michael's frantic, panicked voice came through, mixed with the sound of rushing wind, as if he were driving recklessly. Sarah, you have to get to the hospital. Now. It's Chloe. She tried to kill herself. She took a bottle of sleeping pills. This is all your fault. She couldn't handle the pressure from that damn article you had published. And she did something crazy. I paused, my hand hovering in the air above my son's back. Suicide? Chloe? A shiver went down my spine, but a sharp, cold rationality quickly took over. I remembered her brazen text messages, her meticulous planning when buying the Pressens condo, her defiant eyes in the hotel room. Would a person so greedy, so narcissistic, so full of self-love, really end her life over a few online comments? Is she dead? I asked, my voice devoid of any emotion. Michael seemed shocked by my question. He screamed, "Are you even human? My sister is in the emergency room, fighting for her life, and you can talk like that? Get over here now. If anything happens to her, I will never forgive you." I let out a bitter laugh that echoed in the dark room. Cut the act, Michael. You get suspended from your job, I file for divorce and put a freeze on our assets, and she just happens to attempt suicide at that exact moment? Isn't that a little too coincidental? Is this a pathetic attempt to pressure me into dropping the lawsuit, or are you just trying to create a justification for having to take care of your poor, pitiful sister? What are you talking about? Michael's voice faltered. Listen carefully. I have no intention of being an audience for your cheap melodrama. If she dies, it's because of her own choices, or because you drove her to it. What does that have to do with me? I'm busy taking care of my child. I don't have time to watch a bunch of third-rate actors perform. I hung up. But I couldn't just leave it at that. I called a 24-hour flower delivery service and ordered a large wreath of white lilies to be sent to the FIAS hospital. Michael had blurted out in his rage. With the wreath, I included a card with a short, but lethal, message. Get well soon. We need to see each other in court. That condo in your name is crucial to the asset recovery lawsuit I've filed. It would be a shame to die before you get to enjoy the spoils of stealing my husband. I imagined Michael and Chloe receiving that wreath. I imagined Chloe's face, pale from the sleeping pills, flushing with rage as she realized I no longer felt any pity for her, only a profound, bottomless contempt. Her little suicide show would be over. For those who use their own lives to manipulate others, ruthlessness is the only appropriate response. After sending the wreath, I realized I couldn't stop at just psychological warfare. Michael and his family were far more thick-skinned than I had imagined. They were willing to use a life even if it was a performance to threaten me. I needed a more powerful ally, a weightier voice to crush their shamelessness. And, in this era, there is no power more formidable than the media. The next morning, I arranged to meet with a well-known investigative journalist from a major online news outlet. She was the one who had been tracking the case since my anonymous post. We met in a quiet cafe, where the soft music seemed to soothe my wounded soul. I sat across from her, my hands clasped, my gaze firm, but tinged with sadness. She looked at me with a blend of empathy and professionalism. Miss P, I've reviewed all the evidence you sent. Frankly, in my decade as a journalist, I've never seen a case of such blatant ethical violation. Are you absolutely certain you want to go public with this? Once the article is out, it will have a significant impact on your life and Leo's as well. I looked out the window at the frail sunlight filtering through the leaves and thought of my son. If I remained silent, he would grow up in the shadow of a backspouse, fraudulent father, and a rotten family. It was better to endure one sharp pain, cut out the cancer, than to let it metastasize and destroy his entire life. I turned back to the journalist, my voice low but clear. I've thought about it. Long and hard. I am willing to take any risk for the sake of truth and justice. I have only one request. Please mosaic my son's face and use a pseudonym for his name. The child is innocent. He doesn't deserve to be judged by the world. But, as for me, I am not afraid. The truth doesn't need to be hidden. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. I told her everything, from the day I first fell in love and my absolute trust in my husband, to that fateful night in the hotel and the cruel results of the DNA test. I didn't cry. It felt as if my tears had long since dried up. I recounted my life with a painful detachment, as if I were telling someone else's story. The journalist occasionally stopped, writing to wipe her own eyes. "Don't worry," she said. "I will do everything in my power to help you get the justice you deserve." That night, an article with a shocking headline was published. I shared a bed with my husband and his sister for 3 years. The cruel truth behind a Pac la Grèce. Respectable family's mask. The piece went beyond simply exposing the affair. It delved deep into the pain of a wife deceived both emotionally and financially, and the complicity and indifference of her in-laws. The moment the article went live, the internet exploded. The number of shares grew exponentially every second. I turned off my phone, held my son close, and whispered, "The arrow has left the bow. There's no turning back now." The power of public opinion was more fearsome than any weapon I knew. Overnight, Michael and Chloe became the top trending search terms on every platform. Netizens with superhuman tracking skills quickly unearthed all their personal information, their workplaces, and even old, hypocritical photos. When the camelia details of the 5-year-old illegitimate child and the disguised incestuous relationship were revealed, public outrage reached a boiling point. On Monday morning, Michael had to sneak into his office through a back entrance, his face hidden, instead of striding in confidently as usual. But he couldn't escape the contemptuous gazes of his colleagues. Whispers followed him down the reader's hallways. "That's seriously creepy. Acting so proper all the time, but he was sleeping with his sister. Who would respect a boss like that? He's an animal in human skin." By noon, the corporation where Michael worked issued an official press release, citing a severe breach of the company's code of conduct that had negatively impacted their corporate image and credibility. The board had decided to terminate his employment, effective immediately. Advertisers he had worked with also pulled their contracts and demanded compensation for damages. The career he had built on years of hypocrisy crumbled like a sandcastle before a raging tide. Chloe's situation was no better. The landlord of the luxury condo Michael had secretly been funding personally came and evicted her. The landlord, a tough, middle-aged woman, threw all of Chloe's clothes and belongings into the hallway, screaming, "Get out now. I won't have a homewrecker in my building. People like you bring bad luck to the whole place." I watched the scene unfold through a live stream broadcast by a helpful neighbor. Chloe sat amidst the chaotic pile of her belongings, her hair disheveled, looking utterly pathetic, a far cry from the arrogant, defiant woman of a few days ago. She cried with her face in her hands, but no one offered any sympathy. Passers-by just shot her looks of disdain. I sat in my small apartment, watching the screen. I felt no satisfaction, no joy. Only a vast, empty sadness. The public judgment was deserved, but it also laid bare a painful truth. My family's happiness was shattered, and the people who were once my family were now outcasts. I put down my phone and looked at a sleeping Leo. My son still knew nothing of the storm raging outside. I would spend the rest of my life protecting him, healing the wounds left by his wretched father. Their downfall was a costly lesson in karma, but it was also the final chapter of a past I needed to forget in order to begin anew. On the day of the court hearing, I chose a simple, elegant black suit. I wore light makeup to cover the dark circles from sleepless nights and tied my hair up. The woman in the mirror was completely different from the pathetic housewife of the past. My eyes no longer held resignation, but determination and strength. Jessica squeezed my hand. "Ready? Today, we get justice." We walked into the courtroom. The solemn, cool air sent a slight shiver down my spine. At the defendant's table, Michael was already seated. In just a few weeks, he seemed to have aged a decade. His hair was streaked with gray, his face was gaunt, and his eyes were sunken. He didn't dare to look at me, keeping his head down, his trembling hands clasped together. Next to him, an old lawyer sat with a worried expression. In the gallery sat my mother-in-law and Chloe. My mother-in-law glared at me with pure hatred, while Chloe huddled in a corner, avoiding everyone's gaze. I walked past them as if they were strangers, my back straight, and took my seat. The trial began. A middle-aged female judge with a stern face read out the proceedings. Michael's lawyer stood up, trying to grasp at a last straw of hope for his client. He argued that the evidence I had collected, the hotel video, the text messages, was an invasion of privacy, and therefore lacked the legal grounds to prove Michael's adultery. Your Honor, my client admits to an emotional lapse in judgment. However, Miss P. actions of illegally planting a GPS tracker and unlawfully entering a hotel room to film constitute a clear violation of privacy. The legality of this evidence must be reconsidered. The lawyer spoke forcefully, but his argument was weak. I scoffed internally. Even at this of privacy to cover up his immorality. Jessica stood up, her demeanor confident and sharp. Your Honor, the right to privacy does not include the right to betray and deceive one's wife and child, and to embezzle joint assets. My client's actions were a justifiable defense of Tapper, her family's happiness, and her legal rights as a wife and mother. If hiding a crime is privacy, then where is justice? The judge nodded and cast a stern look at Michael. The defense's objection is overruled. The duty of fidelity in a marriage is both a legal and moral obligation. No act of concealing betrayal can be protected by the law under the guise of privacy. The plaintiff may proceed with presenting the evidence. I saw Michael flinch, his shoulders slumping as if he had just received a death sentence. He realized his last shield was broken. He was now naked before the trial court, facing the judgment of the law and his own conscience. As Jessica presented the most crucial pieces of evidence, the atmosphere in the Michel's courtroom grew taut. These weren't just sordid bedroom photos, they were pieces of evidence with the weight to crush all of Michael's denials. The first was the audio recording of my conversation with Michael at the cafe. His voice echoed clearly in the silent room. His threats to take away custody, his admission of his relationship with Chloe, and the existence of their illegitimate child. A murmur went through the gallery, and contemptuous glares were directed at the PL man huddled at the defendant's table. Michael covered his ears, as if he couldn't bear to hear his own cruel words. He never could have imagined that the arrogant words he had uttered when he held power would now become the noose tightening around his neck. Next, Jessica held up the DNA test results. Your Honor, this is irrefutable proof of the defendant's adultery. The DNA test confirms with a 99.99% probability that the defendant is the biological father of Chloe's son, Daniel. This proves that this inappropriate relationship has been ongoing for at least 5 years, since before the defendant married my client. A wave of shock rippled through the courtroom. Low curses could be heard. My God, for 5 years, he deceived his wife. Incest, too. It's disgusting. A man like that should rot in prison. The judge banged her gavel, demanding order, but she couldn't stop the tide of outrage. Just then, a thud was heard from the gallery. It was my mother-in-law. Having heard all the charges and seen the DNA results, she couldn't withstand the shock. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the floor, clutching her chest. The truth that her fake grandchild was her real grandchild, that her perfect son was a master deceiver, had shattered the old woman who had lived her life for empty appearances. Mom! Mom! Michael and Chloe rushed over in a panic. The courtroom descended into chaos. An ambulance was called, and the wail of the siren tore through the Platis already heavy atmosphere. I sat still, watching the chaos unfold with a detached, albeit pitiful, gaze. I didn't wish her dead, but I knew this was the debt price for her years of condoning and enabling sin. Karma spares no one. It may be late, but it always arrives at the most precise and cruel moment. Michael looked at me, his eyes filled with despair and a silent plea. I just shook my head slightly. Everything had gone too far. There was no going back. The judge's gavel came down with a dry, final sound, putting an end to the long, wearying battle and opening a new chapter in my life. The courtroom fell silent, and only the judge's clear voice reading the verdict echoed. Each word was like a needle stitching up the wounds of my bleeding heart, and at the same time, a blade tearing apart the last shred of the defendant's honor. Based on the irrefutable evidence of the defendant Michael P.'s serious adultery, the birth of an illegitimate child during the marriage, and the seepage, antecedents, illegal concealment of joint assets, the court grants the plaintiff Sarah P. petition for divorce. Full physical and legal custody of the minor child, Leo P., is awarded to the plaintiff, Sarah P. The defendant is ordered to pay child support in accordance with state guidelines. I squeezed Jessica's hand, feeling her warmth and a slight tremor. My heart pounded, not with anxiety, but with anticipation for the final, most important part, justice for the assets. Regarding the division of marital property, the judge's solemn voice continued, as the defendant is the sole at-fault party for the dissolution of the marriage, and has been found to have fraudulently misappropriated joint assets for his own illicit purposes, the court orders the assets to be divided at a ratio of 80% to the plaintiff and 20% to the defendant. Specifically, the marital residence and the vehicle shall be awarded to the plaintiff, Sarah P. The defendant, Michael P., is further ordered to reimburse the plaintiff for the funds illegally used to purchase a property for Chloe. Michael slumped over the table, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. He probably never imagined, even in his wildest dreams, that he would walk out of this courtroom a nearly penniless man. All his years of calculation and cunning had ultimately become the snare that trapped his own future. I glanced at the proscenate gallery. My mother-in-law, who had just regained consciousness, sat in a daze, tears streaming down her old face. Chloe was huddled in a corner, unable to lift her head. A heavy silence, born from the consequences of betrayal, enveloped them all. I let out a long breath. The 1,000-pound rock that had been crushing my heart, too, was finally gone. After the trial, I walked out of the courthouse. The faint afternoon sun spilled over the old stone steps. Jessica came up beside me and patted my shoulder, her eyes shining with joy. We did it, Sarah. Justice was on our side. Seeing the Sarbi look on Michael's face when he heard the verdict was so satisfying. I managed a faint smile. Before I could say anything, a loud string of curses erupted behind us. I turned to see a chaotic, tragic scene. Michael, once so suave and polished, was now in the middle of the courthouse square, grabbing Chloe by the hair and shaking her violently. His face was contorted with rage and despair as he screamed, "This is all your fault. All of it. If you hadn't begged me to buy you a house, to give you security, I wouldn't have lost everything. You worthless bitch. Give me back my money." Chloe cried and struggled to break free, a pathetic sight. "You coward. You were happy to enjoy it when things were good, but now that it's hard, you blame me? You did it because you wanted to, not because I held a knife to your throat." A crowd gathered, phones were raised, cameras flashed. The two people who had once vowed their souls to each other, who had built their happiness behind my back, were now tearing at each other like wounded beasts. They had no dignity left. Greed and selfishness had laid bare the true nature of their sordid relationship. Court security guards ran over and pulled them apart. Chloe took the opportunity to flee. She ran into the street, covering her face, disappearing into the crowd, as if escaping the judgment of her own conscience. Michael stood there, disheveled and panting, glaring with hatred at the back of his vanished mistress. From a distance, I quietly watched the end of this sordid melodrama. There was no more jealousy, no more pain. Only a sense of pity remained. Pity for lives that had chased only desire and material wealth, only to end up with loneliness and humiliation. The first thing I did after the verdict took effect was to call a locksmith and have every lock in the house changed. The sounds of drilling and hammering were loud, but my heart was strangely calm. With each new lock installed, I felt I was reclaiming sovereignty over my life, ensuring the remnants of the past could never again invade the sanctuary of my son and me. With the assets I received and the money Michael repaid, I decided to realize a dream I had set aside in my youth. Opening my own skincare spa. It was a dream I had willingly sacrificed for my husband's success. Now, it became my life raft, my new hope. The early days of the business were challenging. I was the owner and the sole employee. My hands were constantly stained with essential oils and herbs. Some days, I was so exhausted I just wanted to collapse into bed, but seeing Leo's angelic sleeping face gave me a surge of strength. I couldn't fall apart. I had to stand strong to be his pillar. I repainted the walls, changed the curtains, and threw out every old thing that reminded me of Michael. The house gradually transformed into a warm, bright, new space. My parents would visit sometimes, and seeing their daughter, busy, but with a sparkle in her eye, they were relieved. My taciturn father once patted my subcitern shoulder, and said, "I'm proud of you, my girl. You stood up where you fell. That's my daughter." My spa gradually found its footing. Clients who appreciated my dedication and skill began to grow in number. I was no longer a woman who hovered in the rabbit kitchen, worrying about what my husband would eat, or where his next business trip was. I was a financially independent woman who knew how to love and care for herself. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. I sat in the small office of my spa, looking out at the bustling street. The brilliant autumn sun streamed through the window, dancing on the fragrant oil bottles. Leo was now in the 1st grade. The older he got, the kinder and more thoughtful he became, my greatest pride. Yesterday, Jessica came by and casually mentioned news of Michael. After losing everything, he couldn't find a decent job due to his reputation and was now working as a delivery driver, living a meager existence in a dingy studio apartment on the outskirts of the city. As for Chloe, she had taken her son and disappeared without a trace after the courthouse fiasco. Rumor had it she had moved to a poor rural town to escape public scrutiny. Hearing this news, my heart was surprisingly calm. There was no sense of triumph, no resentment, no lingering affection. It felt like hearing stories about strangers who had briefly crossed my path. I realized that karma is real. Those who sow the wind will reap the whirlwind. Those who hurt others will eventually pay the price with loneliness and poverty. I took a sip of chrysanthemum tea. A subtle sweetness spread across my tongue. My life now may not be one of great wealth, but it is peaceful and free. I have work that I love, a kind son, healthy parents, and true friends. That is true happiness. A happiness that comes from within, one that no one can ever take away. I looked down at a photo on my desk, taken last summer on our trip to the coast. In it, Leo and I were laughing brightly under the sun. The painful past was over. The door to the future was wide open. I opened my notebook and began to write down new plans for my spa, for my son, and for myself. Outside, the sky was still blue, the sun still warm. Life, like the ground hardening after the rain, always finds a way. And women like me, who rise from their wounds, will always bloom again, as dazzling as sunflowers turning towards the sun.